Hi everyone, welcome to Fully Book Chats. I'm Alex and I'm here to interview another award-winning author for today. Our guest grew up in Orange County, California, and now lives in Los Angeles with his wife, novelist Nicola Yoon, and their daughter. He drew the illustrations for Nicola's number one New York Times bestseller, Everything, Everything. He is the author of Super Fake Love Song and the New York Times bestseller, Frankly in Love, which was a William C. Morris Award finalist and an Asian Pacific American Award for Young Adult Literature honor book. His first adult novel, Version Zero, was just recently published in 2021. Let's all welcome David Yoon.
Hi everyone.
Hey, David. Hi. It's great
Hi
to have you
Alex.
with us.
It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure, thank you so much. It's really our pleasure. So, before we go and talk about all the book stuff, of course, we'd like to ask you, how are you doing these days and where are you calling us from?
So I'm in Los Angeles, California, in the United States, and I'm doing pretty well. Uh, all I can think about is pandemic these days. Our
Yes.
cases are doing pretty well. We're vaccinated, and we're just waiting for our daughter to be vaccinated.
Mm,
And other than that, just very busy with things.
mhm,
With our Joy Revolution imprint, which I don't know
mhm,
if you know this, it's our imprint dedicated to love stories starring people of color,
mhm.
written by authors of color. And we also have a first look film and TV deal with anonymous content via our other company, which is Universe Media, and we're
Mhm.
creating stories for that. So there's a lot of writing and reading happening in the Yoon household.
Yeah, that's great news. And it's really great as well that, things are starting to get better. Even here in the Philippines, during the past days, we're seeing like
All
a
right.
slow decline in cases,
Yeah.
but we really hope it continues to get better because we'd like to have you here with us in the Philippines soon, to do this
I would love to
personally.
go. I mean, I've heard things from my friend Adam Silvera and some other authors
Mm,
who have been in the Philippines. Are like, it's a madhouse, like in the best way possible. Just like
yes.
people are so passionate about books, which I love.
But have you been here in the Philippines? I assume you haven't, right?
No, I
Yeah.
never got to go because as soon as pandemic hit, it sort of shut down
Mm,
all the events. But I'm
yeah.
dying to see it. So whenever it's safe, I'll be there.
Yes, we really do hope it gets better. So you come here and visit us for the first time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be so much fun.
Yeah. So anyway, speaking of first times, it's really excited to know that your latest novel, I have it right here, of course, and I've read it. I'm so excited to talk about it. It's your first adult book that you've ever written. So can you please share what Version Zero is about and what was the inspiration behind the book?
Well, version zero is about this, 20 something. Uh, he's a young tech entrepreneur, and
Mm,
he really believes in technology. He actually believes that it can save the world, and he works in
mm,
the tech internet industry. And for the company he works for, it's a social media giant. He discovers that they're doing some unsavory things with user data, and so he blows the whistle because he believes in doing the right thing, and he immediately gets blacklisted and fired from the industry. And so he teams up with a group of hackers to set about taking the big five tech companies to task for their sins against humanity. And along the way, causes a lot more damage than he realized. So that's what it's about. And it involves like this reclusive tech CEO that kind of comes out of hiding to help them. He's like
yeah.
this psychopathic or sociopathic Mark Zuckerberg type,
The
and
JD Salinger, right?
the
Of
JD Salinger
tech.
effect, yeah. And the main character, whose name is Max, poor guy, he's suffering from unrequited love for his best friend's girlfriend. So
Mhm.
so there's a sort of a lopsided love triangle there too. But yeah, the whole thing. I mean, I was inspired because before I started writing for full time, I worked in tech. I was a user experience guy. So I designed interfaces and apps and stuff like that, and I worked in every industry for over 12 years, from like social media to cybersecurity to ad technology. And ad tech is the technology that scrapes your behavior and tries
Mhm.
to figure out what kind of person you are, and then sells that data to advertisers so they can serve up the best ads. And
That
and I
sounds kind
worked
of
with a lot.
creepy.
I know it was, and it's so weird. Like we're so good at it too, and I worked with a bunch of smart people, a bunch of good people who just they're nerds and they just wanted to make cool stuff. Um, but one day I just looked around the office and I realized that everyone, to a person in the office, had ad blockers installed on their laptops and on their phones. And I was like, okay, that's weird. I felt like we were like a bunch of non-smokers working in like a cigarette company, you know?
Yes.
And I was like, I have to write about this. There's a paradox there
Mhm.
that we are living in that is compelling to me. We joke about like how Siri is always listening or Alexa is always listening, and it's funny, but it's also creepy. It just shows how much we've normalized strange behavior through
Yeah.
technology. So I had to write about it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I can't help but smile because while I was reading the book, I it was just so relatable. Like I thought, like, is this the real world? I can, it's so much of a resemblance of the world that we're living in now. But more on that later on. But I would like to ask you first, though, since this is your debut adult novel, so how was the experience from shifting from one audience to another? And like, what made you decide that, version zero was going to be your debut adult novel?
I actually, funny thing is, like, I actually started writing version zero before Frankly in Love.
Oh.
So I've been working on it for a long time,
Mhm.
and I was trying to figure out, like, how do you write about technology? Um, and it actually, I was thinking, should I make it a young adult novel? And I really couldn't, because I realized, a lot of young adult novels, they come from a place of hope.
Mm.
They can get dark too. Like, there's a lot of fantasy, YA fantasy and YA horror and sci-fi that are very dark, but at the core, they come from a place of hope. Whereas adult books are not so much. mostly, mostly they ask the question. They're like,
Yeah.
"What is this?" Or look at this thing, this awful thing. Um, and so I realized that since so much about the internet and technology is just unresolved, like,
Mm.
is it good? Is it bad? Has the whole thing been worth it? I don't know. But I figured this book would just sort of ask those questions through the characters, um, and also portray it as almost like its own kind of dystopia, its own kind of alternate reality. Because sometimes it feels that way. Sometimes I look at the stuff we're doing on our phones and I'm like, that's so weird. It's like I'm on another
Especially,
planet.
yes. Yes, personally, I like to curate my feed, and I try to curate my feed. And when you look at it in real life and you reflect, wait, is this really, how I would do that in real life? So I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's so
so
true. Even my one of my very good friends, she was like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, I was going through some stuff, and I was like, "Not so good.
mm,
It's a little rough right now." And she said, "God, because your Instagram, everything looks so perfect." And
exactly.
this is not like a stranger. This is like a good friend of mine. So
Hmm.
even she was sort of fooled by the curation of, your life.
Thank you for sharing. Since you mentioned that you wrote version zero for Franklin Love, correct? Yeah. So
Yeah.
did the pandemic have any effects on you as an author and creative in general, since you wear so many hats? You're also an illustrator, you're a musician, you're an entrepreneur. It's fantastic. And if yes, could you share a little bit about that and maybe how you were able to cope?
I mean, the pandemic really messed me up. I mean, it was not good. So many systems were revealed to be sort of faulty and inadequate for the situation. And there's a real sense of, like, a loss of security and a loss of control, um, and just instability. And so to cope with that, I just started making stuff. That's it's what I did when I was a kid. I was constantly making things, and that's what I started making a video game for fun. I started. I finished up City of Orange, which is my next adult book, and I started some other projects. And it's because I wanted a sense of control over my life. And since I couldn't control the larger things that were happening, I looked for the things I could control, and that's always been writing.
And thank you for doing that, because we as readers were very much confined in our homes. But thankfully, we have, books like version zero that we can hold on to keep us sane.
Oh, you're so sweet.
No, it's really the truth. And, your other books as well. So let's get on and talk about the book. The
Yeah.
plot of
Okay.
this is heavily rooted on as to what you said earlier, currently experiencing in modern times. We're being surrounded by all these tech giants, social media, and all these apps, and the internet in general, and it has really become part of our daily routine. While it has
Mhm.
been useful for us, these also have negative effects, as you've talked about in the book, trolls, and fake news.
Mhm.
So, why do you think it was really important to focus on these things and shed light to stories like this?
I mean, I was really struggling with the question of has it all been worth it? You know, I was personally, especially when all this stuff was happening here in the United States, a lot of turmoil and unrest. I was scrolling my phone all day. First thing in the morning, wake up, turn on my phone, start scrolling, all day, all day, all day. And it was the last thing I did before I went to bed. And I started to like I was having anxiety, and I couldn't sleep very well. So I talked to my therapist and I talked to my wife, and they were like, "Take a break," you know. So I not only stopped reading the news, but I also stopped reading my fun stuff. You know, I like to read Mac news about everything Apple related, and I like to read like silly things, and I realized, you know, Marie Kondo, right? Um,
Yes. Yeah.
so my head is like a room too. So I Marie Kondoed my brain by decluttering it, because I realized that every morning I was shoveling stuff into my brain and it was getting
Yeah.
full, and that was causing me stress. And so as soon as I did that, I I stopped using my phone for most of the day, stopped looking at the internet. And when I meditated, I flashed back to high school. And I felt like I was in high school again because that was before the internet, and that was the last time I had real headspace, to just be free to think whatever I wanted and have the room to do that. Because all I had were books and records and my friends, and that's kind of it. Um, and so there's a lot of room to mentally run around, and that was really interesting. It was a really interesting experience because it made me realize just how much stuff we're putting in our heads, and we don't have the space for it, and it's all sort of enabled by things like this. Um, that's why I wanted to really sort of set a story in that world, because it's so hard to navigate, and we don't know if it's been worth
Yeah.
it or not. I don't know. Do you think like we're? What do you think? You have to answer. Is the internet a good thing or a bad thing? What would you say?
Personally, I've also had my struggles with it. Like there were also times that I had to remove it from my phone, like totally
Hmm.
wipe it out. Yeah, and but there's also this fear that when I delete my account like permanently, like all of my files, all of the memories will be gone. So for a while, I just have this social media fasting, or
Hmm.
staying away from social media. And a couple of days or even just a day later on, I got I think about it and I miss it, I
Yeah,
miss
yeah,
it, yeah. And I find myself just reinstalling it back, and and the cycle continues. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's
It's
yeah.
really difficult, you know. I
Mm,
think I think occasionally human beings they stumble on certain technologies that really tap into like the limbic brain, you know, the lizard brain.
mhm.
Like when you're driving, there's road rage because it's very territorial and it unleashes something primitive in our minds, you know, like TV triggers the orienting response.
Mhm.
It's sort of like what's outside the cave? Something just passed by outside the cave. What
Yeah,
is that? But in TV, you're always doing that. And this also is triggering something very primal in our
yeah.
brains. Totally by accident, really. We didn't plan on that.
And it's really interesting because when you scroll, it's like infinite. It doesn't have any end. So you're really entertained, and you don't really have time for to check what time it is, or like is it
Hmm.
already lunchtime. It just passes on by.
Yeah. And have you heard of something called email apnea? It's
Oh
a
yeah.
is a term coined, I think, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and it's a real physical response. Like when you're scrolling,
Hmm.
people actually tend to stop breathing. They hold their breath, and then when they stop scrolling, they start breathing again.
Oh
And
wow.
so you're literally depriving your brain of oxygen as you're scrolling. It's fascinating.
Hmm. And yeah, speaking of all these things, and for you also in a very personal level, why do you think it's so hard to disengage from social media? Like for you, I'm assuming, do you use social media? Do you have Facebook or Twitter,
I mean, I would
Instagram?
I would like not to, but
Mhm.
I do it mostly to connect with fans and readers,
Yeah.
and just to let them know, hey, I've got a new book out, and if someone shouts me out, I want to know about that. There's
Yeah.
some fans that are just really super sweet and supportive.
Mhm.
I want to make sure that I acknowledge them, because that's my community. So I have to be on there, and as soon as I get on like Instagram, I get immediately distracted, start, and it just starts scrolling, and I don't even. I'm just looking. I'm just looking at like someone's baby, and there's a cake and toes in the sand at the beach. Like I don't. It's just random junk that's filling my
Sometimes
head.
super random, like potatoes
Yeah.
dressed up in dresses.
Exactly. And the thing that like Max, the main character in the book, he sort of thinks about, we have all this technology. It's amazing advanced technology, um, to create this sort of strange experience where you're scrolling through random things. That's it's not only is it sort of meaningless and nonsensical, but it's also permanent. So
Mhm.
paradoxically, it's a permanent record of nonsense. And that paradox that we live in, I think, is fascinating too. It makes me wonder, like back in the day, centuries ago,
Mhm.
when people made books, they really considered, is this, useful? Will this still be useful generations from now? Let's write only about important things. And that was the permanent record. And fast forward to now, and our permanent record is sort of everything. It's a big, salad of stuff. And it makes it hard to figure out what's important. And that's sort of one of the points that Max in the book is trying to make. It's like we've lost sight of what's important. And when you lose sight of what's important, it's easy to go down any kind of wrong path and make
Yeah.
bad decisions,
Yeah, I
like he
love
does.
Max. Yeah. I love Max. He is so idealistic, and I
I
just
know.
feel for him, poor guy. But
Poor
guys, you
guy.
have to read the book in order for you to get what we're saying here. So anyway, the protagonists, as you mentioned, Max, Akiko, and Shane, and the hacks that we were trying to do was to
Hmm.
take people off of the internet, to disengage. And there's this one line in the book that's really beautiful that you wrote. In order to fix things, sometimes you have to break them, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of
Mm.
really the heart of version zero, right? So,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and it came from, I just, God, I realized one day that my life had been reduced to numbers. Like
mhm.
my generation used to say, I'm not a number, I am a human being with a name. And now we are numbers. We are our follower counts, our like counts, how many posts we have, how many comments we have. We look at numbers very closely. And when we look at other people, we look at their follower counts and we're like, are they important? Or are they not important? Well, they have a lot of followers. They must be important. And so we reduced ourselves and each other to numbers. And not only are we okay with that, but we kind of enjoy it,
Mm,
which is very interesting.
yeah.
And so Max sees this, and he and Akiko and Shane and Pilot, who's the reclusive JD Salinger of tech,
Mhm.
CEO, they set about creating these escalating series of hacks to try to get people to be more aware of what their technology is doing to their minds. And they get crazier and crazier. And that was so much fun coming up with those. Like one of them is like removing likes from across the internet, and the whole internet just goes crazy. Um, but it goes way out of control, so to say the least. And
To
I don't want
say
to
the
give anything
least.
away, but
Yes,
yeah.
to say the least. One of the things I really loved about the book, aside from the plot itself, is the way it was written, and also these little codes and Easter eggs inside the
Oh
book.
yeah.
Yes, I've watched that TikTok, and it gave me goosebumps. Like, oh my goodness, this is so creepy.
I got
Wow.
so
Yeah.
lucky. My editor Mark Tavani at Penguin, I was like, can I put an Easter egg in there? And he was like, oh, that's so awesome. And so my genius 15-year-old nephew, my brother's son, I was like, hey, can you write something? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you're the best. I'll buy you pizza. And it made it into the
Yeah.
book.
I thought it was just random, but amazing work, amazing
Yeah.
job on that. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
So anyway, you've mentioned earlier that you worked in the tech industry for a couple of years. How many years was that?
Oh man, it's like 13 or 14 years.
13 years. Wow. So maybe that's why some of the conversations in the book sounded so real, especially the office conversations. While
Mhm.
I was reading it, I felt like I was inside the office, and hearing the bosses talk.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
there are so many paradoxical, strange moments in when you work
Mhm.
in the tech industry. There's a lot of talk about saving the world or making the world a better place,
Mhm.
while being very invasive at the same time. Um, I mean, my career spans the very beginning of the internet until maybe 5 years ago, and so there were like two phases really. The beginning of the internet was very idealistic and it was very simple, and then something shifted to social and ad tracking, and then
Mhm.
everything sort of became surveillance. And I was sort of there for that. I think the reason why I didn't quite get that my ad tech job was a little bit creepy was because I was sort of still stuck in the first phase of the internet. That's where
Mhm.
my head was at. Oh, it's just we're making cool stuff, we're having fun. It took me a while to realize that we're building surveillance tools. Um, and what's my role in that? What does it mean to be good at something like that? And that was a sort of the inspiration for Max's character, where he has this crisis of faith because he really loves technology. He's a nerd. He believes in that it can make the world a better place. And when he sees that he's part of a machine that's making the world, actively making the world a worse place, he has to re-question everything.
Yeah, and while Max was like trying to save the world from the internet, he also faces other concerns in the book. That you've
Mhm.
put in the book. So he is a Salvadoran American, and his
Mhm.
parents are immigrants, right? So there's also a line in the book that reads, Max had read something about immigrants, how they come wanting a better life, and how their kids wind up taking that better life for granted. And
Mhm.
lo, a generation gap is born. So could you please elaborate this further?
Yeah, it's every immigrant kid I think in America really goes through this where you have parents that come from poverty or from difficult circumstances and they move here and suddenly they're gone and their kids are going to the mall and going to a school and driving cars and they have no idea what their parents went through,
Yeah.
um, to get to a safe place, and the parents don't really expect them to. The whole point was to, I mean, if I were a parent and I came from a war zone, I would do anything I could to get my child to a safe place. um, but once they're there, a gap forms immediately because there's no way the child can understand what the parent has been through, and nor should they. That's the whole point of emigrating. Um, but it just creates a gap when the child doesn't understand what's important to the parent, and the parent doesn't understand what's important to the child, but they still love each other and they're
Mhm.
trying to relate. And I mean, a lot of my friends are immigrant kids. I'm an immigrant kid,
Mhm.
and we don't understand our parents. They don't understand us.
Yeah.
And it's you could say it's sad, but it's also like kind of like tender
Mhm.
because it showed how much they cared
Yeah.
about us and how much we owe them.
Mhm. Yeah, like Max, just what you said earlier, he's while he's on this, plot to get everyone away from the internet and save them.
Hmm.
He's also on a journey on finding a sense of belongingness, because I feel personally that when I was reading the book, and because of the unrequited love and the generation gap with his parents, he's he's finding that sense of belongingness in his community or even with himself. That's why he's so attached with Pilot, right?
Yeah, I mean
Yes.
it's true because Pilot is sort of like a father figure that actually
Yes.
understands
Mm-hmm.
his mind. 'Cause he's a brilliant product designer, programmer.
Yeah.
He thinks about technology, and also he sees technology as an opportunity to create a utopia for yourself. So if you don't belong anywhere in the world, but you have all these tools to create a world,
Mm-hmm.
why not build your own world and then belong there? Um, there's a problem with that, and Max figures out what that problem is. But along the way, he really fools himself into thinking that he has control over his destiny, and he kind of doesn't.
And yes, you also talk about this stuff in, almost all your books, characters that talk about misrepresented truths and finding a sense of belongingness. So why do you think these themes are like important to you as a writer?
I mean, I kind of think that that's what everyone's really doing
Mhm.
is, you're born and you're a child and you don't care and you're happy. And then almost immediately, the world starts to try to tell you what kind of person to be, what kind of food to eat, clothes to wear, things like that. And it becomes really hard to have the courage to say, actually, this is who I am, because there's a lot of expectations on who you should be. And as a child of immigrants, me specifically, I went through that. My parents had ideas about who they wanted me to be, like a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. I know now that they wanted me to be not poor. So they they were like, please choose a really well-paying profession, and I was like, I want to be a writer. Um, but
But how did
that's
that sound to them? Like you being, wanting to be a writer? Like,
they thought that I was being childish, honestly. And it took me a long time to understand that they were really concerned for my well-being. I used to think that they didn't care that I wanted to be a writer. That was not the case. It was that they were worried about my financial future. Um, and so, yeah, once I realized that, I was like, look, this is who I am, and I'm going to be okay. You guys made this crazy choice to come to the United States and start your own business, and that was pretty crazy. Your parents would have been thinking you guys are crazy too. Um, so we all and they did that because they just wanted to find a place to belong for themselves. They wanted to be in control of their own destiny. Um, and so I think everyone's really striving for that. They want control over their own destiny and a place where they feel the most comfortable being themselves. And so that's why those themes keep coming up over and over again. It's because it's it's taken me a long time to feel comfortable in my own skin, to feel comfortable as myself, and not worry about what other people expect of me. And I think about the journey a lot.
yeah, while listening to you, I figured that you're really putting your heart into, bits of your heart to your characters, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting that one of the characters in Frankly in Love, I also have a copy here.
Ah.
Really cute cover, and she's Brit, a European American, right?
Yeah.
So there was this scene in the novel wherein Brit stood up for Frank because her parents, assumed that since he was Korean American, Frank knew all things related to Korean food. Yeah. And then Brit confronted her parents about racism, where did the thought come from for this particular scene, and what do you think is the role of young people like Brit, in educating the older generation about racism? Because it's really interesting that you use young protagonists in your book to talk
Hmm.
about these crucial things, and I really admire you for that. So what do
Oh,
you
well,
think
thank you.
is the role of young people like Brit and your other characters in addressing racism?
I mean, specifically for young adult in YA. I mean, the reason that I love YA so much is that first of all, I totally remember what it was like to be a teenager. I don't know why, but it was one of the most exciting times of my life. Um, it's like the first time you're really trying to figure out um, your model of the world. You know, like you're trying to figure out what is true to you in the world. And when I was in high school, I mean, it was nonstop philosophical discussions about everything because we were trying to figure out what the world meant. And when I meet teens at book tours and book events, they're all kind of the same. They're all really thinking hard about what do things mean
Mhm.
and what is just and what's not just in the world. And I don't actually think that that process ever stops. I think the coming of age process repeats. You come of age when you're in your 20s and you're trying to figure out your career. You come of age again when you get married and maybe when you have kids, if you have kids. Um, it's just the first time you really do come of age is when you're 17 or 18. And that's sort of why I like to see young characters really questioning things, really questioning things like the term white. How can we have white and black people? That seems a little simplistic. What's behind that? Let's unpack that.
Yeah. And it's really a great thing that you're talking about these things in your books, not just in YA, but also in your adult books. It's amazing that you were able to insert these things into a thriller horror book. It's not just pure horror and thriller, but there's heart into it. So I really appreciate that about your writing.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I'm so glad you. I really super appreciate that you said that, because I mean, it was kind of true. I worked at so many startups and so many tech companies, and it was always the same. There was almost a racial hierarchy in these companies where the developers all looked the same, and the people in upper management and CEO level kind of all look the same, and marketing all look the same. Like, if you read the book, you'll sort of see my pyramid breakdown.
Exactly.
Um,
You have to read the book. So the next question I'm about to ask you is actually a personal question. I'm very curious because Frankly in Love was published in 2019.
mhm.
Super Fake Love Song. I also have it here, of course. Super Fake Love
Ah,
Song in 2020. And then
mhm.
version 0 came out last May. Then you have
Uh-huh.
another novel coming up, City of Orange in 2022. So please give us a glimpse on your writing process, because how are you able to publish year after another?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we're both Nikki and I. Nikki's an author too. Nicola Yoon. She wrote Everything, Everything, and the Sun is also a star. And her
I'm
latest
also a
book is
fan.
Instructions for Dancing. I'm a fan too. We're just always, like, we met in writing school at Emerson College in Boston many years ago, and ever since then we've always been talking about story. We've never stopped talking about story, and we still talk about story all the time. And sometimes a story will just stick, and then we have to write about it, and we have to get started. Um, and so, really, we're just constantly writing. It's almost compulsive. And I know that if we don't write, then we start to get cranky. So, because that it's almost like it's like exercise. If you don't exercise for long enough, you start to feel tired and achy. So it's like that for our brains.
If you'd allow, could you give us a glimpse on your new book that will be releasing in 2022, City of Orange?
Oh
Like, what is
yeah,
it about? Yeah.
yeah, sure. I mean, I actually, this book started out as a National Write a Novel Month. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's something that happens. I don't know if it's just the United States, but it's shortened out to NaNoWriMo, and it's in November. The challenge is to write nonstop in November, and the goal is to reach 55,000 words. And I did that years ago, and that was the first draft of City Orange. And then I just kept working at it over the years. And it's it's a post-apocalyptic thriller, I guess. It's the sky wakes up.
Oh, it's
He has a
another adult novel, correct?
It's an adult novel, yeah. And
Uh-huh.
Sky wakes up in the middle of nowhere. He's got a head injury. He can't remember who he is, where he is, how he got there. All he knows is that the world has ended, um, and his wife and daughter are somewhere out there in the wilderness, and he has to find them. And it's a different kind of post-apocalyptic story, though. It's very character-driven. It's very internal, and sort of introspective. And it talks a lot about if you lose everything in life, um, how do you find the strength to go on, and continue, and what do you live for, and how do you find that? And so it's that kind of book. It really sort of is my most. It's a really really personal book, because we just had our daughter, so I was
Mhm.
thinking a lot about this stuff. Like, what is essential, what is important. How much of the world can you strip away and still be yourself and still have a life and still know what's important. So I thought a lot about that.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm excited to get my hands on that. Yeah, that will
Yeah,
come out
it's
in May.
yeah, in
Sorry,
May. Yeah,
May 2022. Yeah.
yeah.
So speaking of your daughter, can I just say that you have such a beautiful family? You know, you and your wife are such a power couple. Your hashtag goals, and I love your TikTok videos.
I mean,
Yeah, I just knew that you were an author, but you know, when I visited your TikTok, I didn't knew you were a TikTok star. You know.
I honestly like Nikki was like, we should be on TikTok. And I was like, okay. Because I was like, another thing I have to do. And so we put together a video in like 2 seconds, and suddenly it had like 1 million views. And I
Yeah.
was like, what? And I noticed that a lot of TikTok videos are very stupid, which I love. I love stupid
Yeah.
videos. And so I've always had like stupid video ideas in my head, and they've always been too short for YouTube. So I was like, I'm just gonna have fun with it. I don't even really care about followers or likes or anything. I just like making people laugh. So, because I think everything is funny.
My favorite video was like the hair filter, and you had the teal hair, and then your wife Nicola, you know, she had a real teal hair.
Yeah,
That was pretty
yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
And
So you
we're
know,
just we're goofing around, and I'm like, the filter does nothing to you because you already have blue hair.
that was really funny. Yeah. Speaking of that, can you talk about more about your relationship as creatives and writers? You know, do you read and create each other's works?
Oh
Because
yeah, yeah, yeah. Always, whenever I finish something, I she's the first person who reads it, and vice versa. Whenever she writes something, I'm the first person who reads it. And we're constantly talking about
Such a beautiful family. You and your wife are such a power couple. Your hashtag goals, and I love your TikTok videos.
I mean,
I just knew that you were an author, but when I visited your TikTok, I didn't knew you were a TikTok star.
I honestly like Nikki was like, we should be on TikTok. And I was like, okay. Because I was like, another thing I have to do. And so we put together a video in like 2 seconds, and suddenly it had like 1 million views. And I
Yeah.
was like, what? And I noticed that a lot of TikTok videos are very stupid, which I love. I love stupid
Yeah.
videos. And so I've always had like stupid video ideas in my head, and they've always been too short for YouTube. So I was like, I'm just gonna have fun with it. I don't even really care about followers or likes or anything. I just like making people laugh. So, because I think everything is funny.
My favorite video was like the hair filter, and you had the teal hair, and then your wife, Nicola, she had a real teal hair.
Yeah,
That was pretty
yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
And
So,
we're goofing around, and I'm like, the filter does nothing to you because you already have blue hair.
that was really funny. Yeah, speaking of that, can you talk about more about your relationship as creatives and writers? Do you read and create each other's works?
Oh
'Cause-
yeah, yeah. Yeah, always. Whenever I finish something, she's the first person who reads it, and vice versa. Whenever she writes something, I'm the first person who reads it, and we're constantly talking about story ideas, and we're actually going to work on something together. That's more of a genre novel, still YA, but genre, and yeah. And now that we're reading manuscripts for Joy Revolution, which is our publishing imprint,
yeah.
and we're developing story ideas for anonymous content. It's just like it's nonstop. we just talk about stories all of the time, and one of our missions is to just really normalize seeing people of color in romantic roles. I when I was growing up, I never saw a guy who looked like me as a romantic lead in anything, and Nikki didn't really either. Usually, the black girl in movies and books was always kind of like a sidekick, never the star. And so, we're sort of obsessed with with normalizing that. Because when I saw there was the Cinderella with it was with Brandy and Paolo Montalban. You ever see that in the '90s? And it was like this black and Asian couple, and they were the romantic leads, and in a big Disney production. It was amazing. And then when I saw Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, you ever watch that movie with John
No,
Cho?
no.
It's very stupid. I love it. It's so funny. They just want to go get party and get hamburgers. And I was like, it had nothing to do with racism. It had nothing to do with, him being an immigrant kid or anything. It was just normal kids wanting to have fun. And that's my ideal.
Aside from you both being individual writers and doing such an amazing job in your books, you know, you as a couple are such an inspiration. And thank you so much
Ah.
for what you're doing. So, yes,
Oh,
thank you so much for starting this. And with that, I'd just like to ask also, what does it mean for you to be an Asian American writer? And what do you think is the future of Asian writing?
I mean, honestly, a lot of Asian American writing that gets attention deals a lot with like the immigrant experience or the foreign experience, and you know, it. I would like to see a future where we have more stories that just happen to have an Asian American character as the lead, without mentioning sort of the struggle. Um, the struggle is important. We need to remember the struggle, otherwise we forget the struggle. And Americans are sort of notorious for forgetting their own history. So writing about the struggle is a way of preserving that history. But at the same time, there's a whole other spectrum of humanity that is mostly missing in our media landscape, in books and TV and film. We just don't get to see Asian Americans be just kind of normal people. I was thrilled when Sandra Oh was cast as the lead for Killing Eve, or The Chair, that Netflix is a Netflix show that just came out, where she's just an English department chair at a university, and that's it. And her dad is there and he speaks Korean, but they never comment on it. It's never an issue. It's just her life and presented straight up. And so I see the future of Asian American representation in media looking like that. It comes and go in waves, like we had American, was it American Pie? What was a Margaret Cho show? I forget. Anyway, Margaret Cho's show like in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, and then it went away. And we had to wait a long time for Asian Americans to come back into media. And I think we're still sort of waiting. But hopefully it picks up. We got Kim's Convenience. We had Fresh Off the Boat, which is nice. So maybe there's momentum there.
Yeah, and I'm really hopeful as well for Asian American writers, because it's really great that a lot of books, are coming out, especially this year. I've been seeing a lot of books, and on Book Talk as well. They're also trending, so that's really great news. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's Mary Choi and there's Kat Cho and Jenny Han. I mean, there's so many great writers out there.
Yeah, and for my last question for the first part of our interview, what is your advice for aspiring young writers? And maybe these people are also stuck in somewhere they aren't really passionate about. Say, for example, a job in a tech industry.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, they've been wanting to be writers. Producing their own stories, sharing their stories to the world. So, what would be your advice for them?
Well, I always start with Margaret Atwood. She always says, read, and write, which is read as everything you can get your hands on. Consume media that maybe you think you might not like, because you never know where inspiration is going to come from. And at the same time, just keep writing to exercise your voice and find out what kind of writer you're going to be. Everyone starts out imitating their favorite authors, and then eventually you grow past that and you develop your own style. So it's important to keep exercising that muscle. Beyond that, I mean, practically speaking, I would like, if you can afford it, go to a writing school. Some of them, they're pretty expensive. So if you can't, join a writers group, or there's lots of stuff online that you can do, a lot of communities there, but just find people who are really, really as serious about writing as you are. Because not only will it inspire you to be a better writer and you get valuable feedback and everything, but you'll also make a network. And as soon as one writer finds an agent or gets published, then they can introduce you, and they can all introduce each other. And then you'll start to move your publishing career forward, because writing is different from your writing career. And that's what happened with my friends at Emerson. As soon as one got published, we all sort of helped each other. And that was really important.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you for that wonderful advice. And for the next part of this interview, this is the more fun part. It's called Fast Talk. So you're just going to be choosing between, the choices. And there are some quick questions. You only have to answer about 2 to 3 sentences. All right? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So paperback or hardcover?
Hardcover.
hardcover.
Unless it's
Read.
Japanese paperback, then they're really small. I love those.
All right. Read all day or do you write all day?
Both.
If you would choose only
Oh,
one.
jeez. It's got to be right all day.
All right. Do you read one book at a time or read multiple books at the same time?
One book at a time.
Really?
Yeah,
You don't
multiple
read?
books. I start to feel guilty.
All right. When reading, do you bookmark or do you dog ear?
Bookmark
Book.
always.
Even if you lose them, along the way?
Yeah, and
Or
I
do you
always
lose?
take care of the spine too. Like my teachers in school, they would always complain like, "Did you actually read this assigned book?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just take care of books really well."
And seeing your TikTok video, Shin Ramyun Black or Shin Ramyun?
Black,
And
of
why?
course,
And why?
because it has an extra packet. I don't know what's in it, but it's really good.
All right. Took note for that for recommendations. All right. Your top three books that you always recommend.
I always recommend the book Caste: The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. And it's sort of like the chapter in U.S. history about race and about the Black experience and about how American society is structured as a caste system that I wish I'd learned in high school. It's incredibly important, and once you read it, then you understand America on a deep level. Um, and I always recommend kind of anything by Margaret Atwood. She's just so good. The last book that I really loved was Oryx and Crake, which was a dystopian sci-fi. Um, Kazuo Ishiguro, I'll recommend anything by him because I want to be him when I grow up.
All right. Top 3 manga you always recommend.
It's weird. I'm not really into manga. Like I
Oh.
lived in Japan for 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I never got into manga. I was more interested in like Adrian Tomine. He's an independent like comic book artist. Anything by Chris Ware, who did Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest kid in the world, and also like who else is really good? Oh, I read this book called Woman World. It's this really silly comic book about what if all the men were gone on the planet. It's very tongue in cheek.
All right. Top 3 Dungeon and Dragons class. Sorry.
Top three. I
Yeah.
was always a paladin when I played D&D. I was either a paladin or I was a cleric, um, or I was who always shoots arrows, an elf.
Mhm. All
I was
right.
always an elven class.
Okay. So last quick questions. Who is your favorite author?
My favorite author, I mean, I'm biased, but my favorite author is Nicola Yoon.
Oh, that's so sweet. I was anticipating that, but that's so sweet.
I'm such a fan. And can I tell you, she just wrote a draft of something and it's
Ah,
mind
so
blowing. Like
exciting.
she blows my mind constantly.
So sweet. Your K-pop group that you currently stand.
Well, sort of Blackpink by default, but that's only because of my daughter. but, but I've been into this guy, Bean Zeno. He's a Korean rapper. He's just got a really cool flow. And his song was featured in that zombie movie. What was it? Hashtag Alive. And
Yeah.
this is really cool. It's really cool style.
All right. Would you rather have version 0 adapted into a TV series or a full-length movie?
Full length movie. I love feature movies. Give me like a really awesome 100 minutes, 110 minutes of like a unique singular experience. That's the best. I don't know why. Oh, I do know why. Because your REM state actually when you're sleeping lasts about 100 minutes, and I think that's why movies are about 100 minutes.
Wow. Thank you for that trivia. For you, what's the best app ever made or ever invented?
you know, you sent me this ahead of time, and I have very mixed feelings. But I think the best app is the camera app, um, because now we can all take pictures. But at the same time, now we can all take pictures. Is that a good thing? I don't, that's not always a good thing.
But at least we can do virtual, book tours like
Yeah,
this one.
we can do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Would you rather live in the past with no internet or live in the future where everything is like super advanced?
I have to say it's complicated. In the past was simpler technologically, but it was not so good when in terms of social justice. Um, Hopefully, in the future, we have a lot more social justice because we seem to be getting there, and we figured out our technology. So I'm gonna say the future.
All right. And lastly, for the fully booked signature question, do you judge a book by its cover?
Yes.
There's no shame in that.
I've bought books just because the covers were cool.
All right. Thank you so much, David. It was really a fun interview, and it's great to know you more and your books.
Oh, it was so much fun. I mean, I feel like we could talk for hours, honestly.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And do you like anything to plug or promote or anything else that you want to say?
Not at the moment. Just version zero is on shelves, and City of Orange comes out in May. So hopefully I can see some of you in person in the near future.
Yes. And thank you so much again, David. And of course, thank you everyone who joined us today. Thank you very much. You can check out David's book and the Fully Book online and all Fully Book branches nationwide. Version zero, grab a copy now. And thank you so much again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Keep on
Thanks,
reading.
everyone.
Thank
Yeah, keep on
you.
reading.